Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A big day for crypto markets around the world as the United States has passed all three crypto bills put through the House yesterday. They're scheduled to make their way to the president's desk tonight and should have major implications on the price of Bitcoin and major cryptocurrencies around the world. We're going to be talking about that and its implication to both the Bitcoin and Ethereum companies we cover on the channel, in addition to some recent news. Before we get into it, take a second, hit the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. In addition to that, if you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, we'd love to have you. And let us know in the comment section below how you're feeling about the crypto markets and if you're currently buying, selling, or holding. With that being said, let's get into today's podcast. All right, guys, away we go. Friday afternoon here, final day of the trading week, a very event-filled week in the Bitcoin and crypto world, Anthony. We reported yesterday, crypto week in the United States, three monumental bills going through the House for a vote. All three of them now passing through the House and scheduled to make their way to the president's desk. So a monumental week and day for Bitcoin and crypto really around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. It appears the president's going to sign them later today. So the three bills, the Clarity Act, the Genius Act, and the Anti-CBDC Act, all approved yesterday and are with him in the office now to be signed this afternoon, apparently in the White House.
Most definitely. So the general consensus here is that the Trump administration has delivered on their promises in terms of the crypto adoption and legislation. We've heard about this Bitcoin strategic reserve at a national level. It sounds like, Anthony, they may be missing a few Bitcoin. I saw a few tweets going around that they're closer to 28,000 than 200,000. So potentially a little bit more buying needed than anticipated. I think initially we had said that 200,000, Senator Lummis felt that would cover the first year's worth of purchase on the way to the million. So a little bit behind the eight ball now. However, Trump has also come out saying now he's going to open up 401k plans and pension plans to Bitcoin, potentially unlocking up to $9 trillion worth of money that could flow into these assets. So this, Anthony, is another key step here. It really feels the foundation has been laid. Banks are now piling in, stating that they're going to allow clients to purchase, buy, and sell Bitcoin right in their retirement accounts. A phenomenal step in terms of the adoption curve.
Yeah, there is. And, you go back not too long ago, and we used to, we've used HODL 15's charts quite a lot of that period. When he first started putting his charts out, there was like only 70 companies who had Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And to get onto that list, I think the lowest one was 3. And I looked today and there's now, he has to restrict it to 100 because obviously the table will be too big. There's far more than 100. But to get on that list of 100, you've got to have a minimum of 25 Bitcoin. So that tells you there's been a significant growth spurt. I mean, obviously, we know that strategy have got, I think 601,550 Bitcoin on their balance sheet. But there's a lot more companies, and there's a lot that are coming out of the woodwork on a sort of like a daily basis. We've announced some of the more recent ones, but there are companies that are coming out literally daily now, having started the process of using this strategy to purchase Bitcoin and hold it on their balance sheet.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And if you look at the price of Bitcoin, Anthony, we've talked about this snowball effect. As people see other people making money on the Bitcoin strategy, they're going to obviously want to adopt that type of a thought for their businesses as well. So you can see the snowball is starting to take effect here. The other thing we wanted to report on, Charles Schwab, so a $10 trillion banking company, just announced live on CNBC today that they're going to enable Bitcoin buy and sell within Charles Schwab accounts. So you can see this momentum is building, Anthony. Now, in terms of momentum, on the ETF side of things, we haven't looked at one of these charts from HODL 15 in a while. ETF inflows, absolutely monstrous, multiple days above $1 billion, almost every day on the list in the hundreds of million category. I know I've been adding to my IBIT position this week as well, but it seems the demand for Bitcoin or Bitcoin proxy investments is truly insatiable right now.
Yeah, and that's all the ETFs there. But if you even just looked at the BlackRock ETF, the IBIT ETF, they've purchased over 30,000 since the start of July. Now, we've talked about the production that miners take on, and with only 450 Bitcoin being produced a day, that's a little over 7,000 Bitcoin being produced over the same period. And the question mark is where are these ETFs getting their Bitcoin from? Because the miners aren't selling all their Bitcoin at the moment, and they're certainly not producing anywhere near the amounts that these ETFs and these are the public companies we've been talking about are getting their Bitcoin from. So somebody must be selling Bitcoin out there, and it's not you and me, Bryce. So I need to know who it is.
It's certainly not us. I can't help you with the name, but I did see a tweet going around this morning. I guess someone had purchased a Bitcoin a while back, $54,000 worth of it. They cashed it out today for $8 or $9 billion, Anthony. They held for about 15 years. So truly incredible. And maybe they've decided to cash their check here and sell a little bit of that Bitcoin. But regardless, you can see in terms of Bitcoin price, this is an interesting visual as of yesterday, July 17th. This is a snapshot in terms of Bitcoin price all the way back 15 years to where I guess that OG was buying Bitcoin, Anthony, in the $13,900 range. Now you can see all the way up in the $119,000 range. So really incredible when you look at these daily snapshots a year apart over the course of Bitcoin's history, really to see how this commodity or investment has grown.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see the last couple of years where it's literally moved to some significant levels now. We've already seen it reach 123,000 this year. I don't think we'll see the drop downs like we've seen in the bear cycles previously because of this level of adoption. We didn't have ETFs before, and we're just highlighting them that you look at BlackRock ETF, it has well over 700,000 Bitcoin held in its treasury. That's getting on for nearly 4% of the total amount of Bitcoin. That wasn't around at the last bear cycle. So unless there's some sort of ridiculous sell-off through the ETFs, I think we will see pullbacks, but nowhere near what we've seen on previous years.
Yeah, I'm glad you threw that piece in, Anthony, and it's a very valid point. If you look at just strategy alone, so Michael Saylor has publicly stated they will never sell their Bitcoin. 600,000 Bitcoin, that's around 3% of the total supply. So right there, Anthony, there's 3% less volatility or 3% less Bitcoin that could possibly be sold in the downturn. So that's just one small example, but you start to think about nation states, countries, some of these large hedge funds. These are long-term investments. They're not going to be buying and selling on 4-year cycles, maybe like we saw with retail in the past. So I'm glad you brought that up. Now, another shift we're seeing and tracking on the channel is really the adoption and interest in Ethereum right now. So similar to what we've seen on the Bitcoin side with these Bitcoin treasury companies, we're starting to see a number of Ethereum treasury companies pop up. Now we'll talk about some of the price action in a second, but one of the key differentiators for this sector or segment was the ability to stake Ethereum and receive those 3.5% yields, unlike the ETFs. However, BlackRock has just put out a statement that they're now filing for the ability to stake their Ethereum in the ETF. So I wanted to get your opinion here, Anthony, as this potentially could shake up the foundation of those Ethereum strategy companies.
Yeah, I mean it's at the end of the day it's an increase in purchase of ETFs. So economics will say if the amount of Ethereum that's been purchased is greater than what's out there, then you'll see the price hike. And we've seen the price hike this last sort of 5-6 weeks for Ethereum far greater in terms of percentage than the Bitcoin price has. And the Bitcoin price has done really well, but Ethereum's done very much the better. But if you go back over longer periods, you tend to see them sort of balance it out a little bit. Ethereum did have a large dip last year, It reached sort of like all-time highs, well over the $4,000 mark, and then dropped literally all on its way all the way down to about $1,500. So it's now pulled back. It was, I think early this morning, it was well over $3,600. So that gives you an indication that there's a lot of interest in Ethereum at the moment, and a lot of these new treasury companies that are looking to make a name for themselves are looking at the Ethereum side of things, and it's proven to be very, very popular. And we cover one of those companies already in our platform.
Yeah, we certainly do. And we talk about MNAV in terms of the Ethereum companies. So it'll be interesting to see how that's impacted now if the ETFs are able to stake their ETH as well. So one to keep an eye on. On the topic of a Bit Digital, the one we do cover on the platform here within the Ethereum group, Anthony, they've come out with an additional purchase, now eclipsing 120,000 Ethereum tokens on their corporate balance sheet. The other piece to consider here, you guys, is we've been hearing news that 80% of white fiber, ticker WYFI, will be going to existing Bit Digital shareholders. So not only are you getting exposure to all of this Ethereum, you'll see on the chart here, the third ranked Ethereum corporate treasury company in terms of the pubcos, you're also getting the spin out or exposure to white fiber, again, 23, 24 clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, recently, Bit Digital announced to sell 22 million shares at a price of around about $3.06, and that $67.3 million after costs. And these shares were sold to institutional investors, were effectively used to pay for the 19,683 Ethereum. So that's taking their total Ethereum to 120,306. And if you think back to maybe a quarter ago, it was around about the 24,000 mark. So you can see they've really been aggressively increasing their Ethereum strategy. They even went and sold their Bitcoin. So that's how confident Sam and the team are at Bit Digital. You sell your Bitcoin to buy Ethereum. Not too many companies do that, but Sam believes that the utility of Ethereum's undervalued at the moment, and the timing of him doing that has currently proven to be a good one.
Yeah, it certainly has. And keep in mind, for those of you who are unaware, Sam Tabar is a lawyer by trade. So he's a businessman, he's a lawyer, he knows the extent of how these Ethereum smart contracts can be used, the versatility. He's talked to us extensively how he feels Ethereum will really reshape both the legal and banking industries. So great to see him following through there. Now, you talk about Sam Tabar raising money. We got to talk about Sharplink Gaming here, Anthony. They've come out upsizing their ATM from $1 billion to $6 billion. So Sam Tabar calling this a race to the top in terms of the Ethereum companies. He's going to have some catching up to do if Sharplink's able to dish out billions in shares.
Yeah, and this is different from what Bit Digital did. They just did a dilution and offered a discount at the share price when they announced it. And it's normally sort of 15-20% discount. So I think if I remember right, the share price of Bit Digital was about $3.62, and the share price came in for the additional 22 million shares at $3.06. So a nice discount for those institutional buyers. And with the share price reaching $4 yesterday, that recovery happened really, really quickly. But this is about Sharplink, and they've got a market capitalization around about just over $1 billion at the moment, and that's been helped obviously with the news that they're pursuing an Ethereum strategy. And so this update from Sharplink today highlights that they have the ability now. They've already got one ATM in place for about $1 billion, and this is now increasing that to a total of $6 billion. Now, the company itself is valued just over $1 billion, so the likelihood of them being able to sell large chunks of shares really, really quickly is probably not going to happen as fast as some people would expect or even think it would go. Some of these ATMs can be for up to, say, 2 years in length, but it gives the company the ability to sell shares when they feel the share price is good enough to get the right amount of capital raised. So, ideally, they want to sell as least amount of shares possible if they're going to utilize that whole ATM. They don't want to be selling at really low amounts and selling lots of shares, because that really is a problem then for the current shareholders who really get diluted. If they're able to sell shares when the share price reaches higher levels. And we've seen that with some of the Bitcoin mining companies when they've been able to sell shares and grow quickly without managing to impact significantly current shareholders. So this might be over a couple of years, and they'll be monitoring the share price. And as the share price, peaks, they'll be able to get their investment banks to, sell shares through the market on certain particular days. And we'll get regular updates from these companies that do that. It's we'll get to find out every quarter how many shares they've sold, and they obviously have an agreement in terms of period and in terms of amount, and it's down to them now to utilize that over that period to grow. And it will be interesting to see how the pickup in Ethereum price is reflected with this amount of potential purchases.
Yeah, that's a lot of chunk change to be going into the Ethereum market here, Anthony. And just to summarize, you guys, essentially what you said there, Anthony, the dilution, the benefit there is you get all the money up front. The disadvantage is you have to offer it at a discount, generally brings down the share price, and a lot of times you'll see a warrant attached to that. So that's the dilution approach that Bit Digital did, as opposed to the ATM approach, where, as you say, Anthony, a lot more control of when and where you're selling, what price you're selling, but you've got to spread that out. Obviously, if you've got a market cap of $1 billion and you're trying to sell $5-6 billion worth of shares, there's only so much volume you can do in a day without impacting that share price. So interesting to see these different strategies, but the numbers themselves just seem to be getting larger and larger in terms of the amount of Bitcoin or Ethereum that these companies are purchasing. Now, the next one we wanted to talk about today, Hive Digital Technologies. We were actually invited to this one. Weren't able to make it due to travel implications, but invited out to New York to ring the bell on the NASDAQ, celebrating their 4 years listed on the exchange. So a big milestone for Hive, and another step in the news cycle here. We're hearing so many positive developments from the team this year.
Yeah, and it's a good news story. I mean, remember, they've just recently surpassed the 12 exahash in global Bitcoin mining hash rates, and that's doubled since early 2025. And that takes them to approximately 250 million of annualized revenue run rate. And that all thanks to their expansion in Iguazu, Paraguay. So great to see Frank Aid and the team and a few other special guests in the pictures from the NASDAQ yesterday. It was a shame, the distance to get to there with with literally a few days' notice was a challenge too far. Hopefully, was open for invites in the future with a little bit more notice. But it's great to see them there having a great time and celebrating what 2025 has been a good year so far and will continue to be a good year. They do expect by Thanksgiving for that 12 exahash to become 25 exahash. So that's another doubling of the hash rate in the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, really incredible growth from the team at Hive this year. And you see Dennis Porter there as well, long-term friend of the channel, Anthony, and instrumental in a lot of this Bitcoin policy legislation that we talked about earlier in the program. So the next one we wanted to get into, a quick update on the Core Scientific CoreWeave saga that's continuing to play out here.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done this table and highlighted it a couple of times. And basically, that when that deal was signed, it gave an indicative value for Core Scientific shares around about $20.40. Because the CoreWeave share price, as at the date the deal was signed, closed at $165.18. And the only issue that shareholders have now is that the number of shares issued by CoreWeave for every Core Scientific share is 0.1235. It doesn't say anything about having a fixed price for that. So effectively, depending on what the CoreWeave share price is, when the deal and if the deal gets approved by shareholders and the SEC, then we'll see how much the value of that share price really is worth there. If we take today's CoreWeave share price, which is $123.69 at the time of this table was put together, literally just before the podcast started, that gave an indicative value of the Core Scientific shares at the moment of $15.28. Now, the current price of the Core Scientific share is about $13, so it's a slight premium to the current position there. But we do have one further issue between now and the timing of the approval, and that is the date in September, which I believe is the 24th of September, where original founding shareholders in CoreWeave, and they represent 83% of all the shareholders, have the ability to sell their shares. Now, even at today's price, $123.69, which has dropped from $165 in the space of a couple of weeks, that share price is still probably 3 times higher than what they originally paid as their investment. So I would imagine quite a few shareholders, even at today's price, will be unlocking those shares and selling them to get some of the profits. And that might have implications then on the CoreWeave share price going forward. And if it drops, below $100 a share, that means the Core Scientific value of their shares are effectively less than what they were before any of these announcements. Prior to the announcements of CoreWeave being interested in buying, Core Scientific share price was around about just over $12 a share. So we did see it spike to $18 on the rumor. The rumor came out literally the week before the announcement. So somebody let that information out and the share price rallied really quickly. I just hope that shareholders do get some value, because Core Scientific, from a shareholder perspective, they had a signed contract with CoreWeave for effectively the next 22 years, delivering close to 1 billion in revenue a year, with a margin of close to 70 to 75% net income, which is a phenomenal amount. You bringing in 750 million of net income per year. That's nothing that the miners could dream of, if even the Bitcoin price is twice the amount it is today. So it was a great deal. I just hope the shareholders are able to see value as they make the decision to approve this deal or not.
Yeah, I hope so too. This is an interesting one, Anthony. A little tough to wrap our heads around. They only need 50% plus one to put through the approval of this, as opposed to the 67% sometimes seen with other types of votes. So this one will be interesting. But as you said, Core Scientific on a great trajectory as a standalone company. Would have been nice to see some sort of a floor price or some sort of a safeguard, I guess, set in place for investors here. So in our members only videos, the Power Play series, Anthony, we actually talk about some of our strategy here in light of these changes with Core Scientific. So I encourage you guys to sign up to that one as well if you're holding Core Scientific shares. Now, the next one we wanted to talk about, a timely update here. We just spotlighted Canaan yesterday on the channel. They're having a strong day today. We'll come on to that in a second. We talked about the Avalon miners, the A15 Pro series. We've also been talking a lot about Cipher Mining, which is coming out with their quarterly earnings on the 7th of August, and their Black Pearl site. So an interesting news story here between these two players.
Yeah, absolutely. And timely. We only spent yesterday producing the insight to Canaan, and already we're making a second announcement on the supply of the 6,840 Avalon A15 Pro miners to Cipher's Black Pearl facility. And one thing about Cipher, maybe a lot no, they don't pay over the odds for mining machines. We've had the pleasure of being in Tyler's company on a number of occasions. And one thing about, we can say about Cipher is, they're not going to overpay for mining machines. They don't overpay for anything, to be honest with you. And so they would have managed to, get a really good deal here. And not the only, miner to utilize, Canaan in the past. I know there's some other miners out there have utilized those. It's not, normally it's the Bitmain or MicroBT have been very have contracts with miners. We know Riot have used MicroBT, and the likes of IREN and CleanSpark and Mara Holdings, using the Bitmain contract. But it's good to see Cipher, getting a deal here with Canaan. And actually, it's probably, all about the return on investment for these machines. A lot of the mining companies, Aidan Killick, who's the CEO of Hive Digital, he'll sit down and go through the numbers, and he'll see which of the mining machines bring out the best. And, they're not afraid to choose different suppliers. if the deal sounds good, and it sounds like a good deal here for both parties in terms of this significant purchase.
I was going to have to correct you there, Anthony. Cypher, I feel like they may have overpaid on the office space. They've got the nicest spot in New York. But as Tyler pointed out when we visited, they actually got a great deal on that as well during COVID. So you're right, Anthony. A keen eye for value with the team from Cypher. And interesting storyline to see these Avalon miners going into deployment. Looking forward to seeing the statistics on those. Now, we wanted to switch things up a little bit. We're going to look at miner prices and Bitcoin price last in the video here today. A strong week across the board, whether you're looking at the Ethereum strategy companies, the data center companies, the Bitcoin miners, the hybrids, MicroStrategy, wherever you're looking here, Anthony. It was a solid week. Not the best performance today. Account was up this morning. It's pulled back into the red. However, if you look at where the miners are today, Bitcoin price today, versus a week, a month, a year ago, definitely moving in the right direction.
Yeah, we've got a lot more green on the sort of the monthly, the weekly, and the year-to-date change. In fact, I remember going back a few months ago, there was only literally one or two miners on the year-to-date change that were in the green. Now we've got probably 7 or 8 there. If you go to the last week, you're quite right. Literally every miner's up there, with the exception of CleanSpark, Hut 8, Hive Digital, and Soluna Holdings down 57% on the week, and that's really the story about their. They also brought out a dilution at 55 cents. The share price actually closed last week at about $1.50, so you can see that coming down. Share price today is actually improved. I mean, it's 65 cents today, but it was down at as low as 40 cents yesterday. So it has made a move in the last day and a half in terms of trading there. But as you can see from today, a lot of miners in the red, predominantly because the Bitcoin price has pulled back. And we've said before, Bitcoin is volatile and the miners are more volatile. So it doesn't take much of a movement on Bitcoin price to get the miners all excited and the share prices start coming down. If you looked at the position pre-market today and at the market open, literally every miner was in the green at pre-market. But as you can see, a couple of hours into trading, we can see the likes of TeraWulf down 5%, Core Scientific down 3%, and we've already highlighted that particular story there. Bit Digital 18% up on the week. So, even though they announced that dilution, the share price has recovered really, really well. That's not the norm in terms of a lot of these dilutions, but Bit Digital have this strategy in there, and they're getting some good exposure, some good traction. And the share price, getting close to that $4. We only just announced a couple of weeks ago about Sam Taban and one of the other directors literally going out and buying shares at $2. So the share price has really rallied from those low parts of the end of June.
Certainly have. Sam Tabar making a quick $1.5 million on the trade in 2 weeks here, Anthony. So good for him. Good for anyone holding shares of Bit Digital. Interesting, yeah, always on Fridays. I don't know if it's the option expiration dates or what it is, Anthony. You'd think after these 3 monumental crypto bills go into the president's office tonight, you'd think Bitcoin would rally today, but as well as I do, Bitcoin price is hard to predict. So with that being said, you guys, it is Friday, newsletter day today. Make sure you guys sign up. We're talking about Hive. We've got the top movers, top losers, and obviously Miner Madness updates all in that newsletter. Let us know your thoughts on the Core Scientific CoreWeave situation. What price would you be happy with there in terms of your Core Scientific shares? Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here on Monday.